Well, everybody, my talk on Italy's Islands of Refuge must quite simply start with one particular island, the island of Lampedusa, southernmost point of Europe, where Africa meets Europe, where the West picks up subtle influences of the East. This island is closer to Africa than it is to the continent of Europe. Lampedusa is about 119 miles from the island of Sicily, but only 70 miles from Tunis in North Africa, which you can see right here on the map that I'd like to pop to. Julia, thanks very much. And here on the map, you can see Lampedusa. You can see how close it is to Tunis, which is off to the left there. And the red line heads right to Tripoli, because Tripoli in Libya is major departure point for immigrants fleeing war, famine, conflict in their own countries, some of them having crossed the Sahara Desert from Mali, from Gambia, from Nigeria, days of trekking without food and water. I've met refugees on the island of Lampedusa and talked to them about these incredible flights to freedom, if you will, flights to Europe. Let's see now. We want to go, whoops. I'm just trying to see if I can maneuver photos here. And here you see the island of Lampedusa, point of refuge in the Mediterranean Sea. Its name probably derives from the ancient Greek word Lampedusa, from the word lapis, meaning rock. But some historians say the word lapis could also be the name of a shellfish caught in the waters around Lampedusa, which is still caught in the waters of Lampedusa. Other historians say the name Lampedusa probably derives from the word lampos, from the Greek, meaning torch, indicating the torches set out on the island to warn sailors over the centuries that they were nearing land. When you arrive at Lampedusa, you wonder if you're in the tropics or in the Caribbean. Stunning aquamarine waters. The island is of lavic rock. This was a volcano probably 700,000 years ago, it's thought. And this is an island of refuge, not just for the immigrants coming here in the hopes of another future, but for the many migrants, we should say, not immigrants, pardon me. The immigrants are those who have permission to settle in a land. Migrants are those who are fleeing from one land to another. The migrants aren't the only people seeking refuge here. There are people who come here seeking refuge from the mundane daily tasks of ordinary life, finding peace swimming off these rocks, finding pleasure eating the extraordinary seafood of Lampedusa. Our first trip to Lampedusa, our only trip to Lampedusa, was in 2013. I wanted to go there to celebrate my 65th birthday. And there's Pino standing in front of what's called the Gateway to Europe, in Italian, Porta d'Europa. It's a sculpture which is 5 meters high, created by Mimo Palladino, artist. And it represents the Europe as an entryway point. It is a tribute to the immigrants who crossed that sea trying to reach safety on the island of Lampedusa. And here you see us, a photo that we took looking from the Porta d'Europa, the gateway of Europe, toward the island. So we're right at the tip of the island here. This is the point of entryway for refugees. As of 2013, when we visited Lampedusa, we knew at that time that over 20,000 refugees had not reached the port of safe haven, and the Mediterranean Sea was the cemetery. As of now, 30,000 immigrants trying to reach the port of safe haven have not made it and have drowned in the sea. These are refugees who are arriving safely at the island of Lampedusa. The history of Lampedusa is ancient. It's been a port for Phoenicians, for Greeks, for Romans. The Romans had workshops here where they made what they considered their very tasty garum, which is a fish sauce of marinated fish. Doesn't sound too appetizing, does it? But garum was produced here on the island by the Romans. And it is also a point where Arabs and Christians often met when they were traversing the Mediterranean Sea, sometimes met peaceably, sometimes less peaceably, but often praying together in separate grottos, one adjacent to the other. So Christians prayed in these grottos, as did Muslims, because it's said that in the 7th century, Muslim Marabuto was buried here. Marabuto is a Berber word which signifies two things. It can signify holy person or saint. It can also signify the tomb or sanctuary where that person is buried. So these grottos were places of prayer for both Christians and Arabs, meeting in them generally quite peaceably. The Arabs, the Muslims, also prayed even to this statue of the Blessed Virgin, which you're going to see in a minute in this sanctuary, because the Virgin is the only woman mentioned in the Quran and treated with great respect as the mother of the prophet Jesus, and also probably prayed to by Muslim refugees, sailors stopping on this island as well. This is the statue of La Madonna del Porto Salvo, Our Lady of Safe Haven, which is right adjacent to those grottos in this sanctuary here. This is the santuario, the holy place, that is, where the statue is contained. Here's Pino on his way. We were on our way to see the statue, the Madonna of the Safe Haven, one evening at sunset. And I was very impressed by two elderly people sitting in a back pew. They didn't even go up to the front near her. They prayed from the back, very, very devoutly. And then they went forward and just quietly touched her cape and left. The Lampedusani have tremendous faith in this lady, Our Lady of Safe Haven. She comes out of the church every year on September 22nd, which is her feast day, and she's carried through the town in procession on the backs of the men. They're coming up the street of the main town of Lampedusa. It's simply called Lampedusa. There's one village, and they're carrying La Madonna del Porto Salvo, Our Lady of Safe Haven. There's her image on the left. On the right, a young woman named Rosalia is holding her image to show us. Rosalia, by the way, is the patron saint of Palermo. And young Rosalia was working at the cash register of this grocery store where we always bought our groceries for the week. We're on Lampedusa. We rented a small apartment. And when we went in that day, the owner of the store, Donatella, and there she is with Pino, told Rosalia, leave the cash register, have the customers wait. These visitors have to see Our Lady of Safe Haven. Take her off the wall. So Rosalia took her off the wall to show her to us, while Donatella told us the whole story of this miraculous Madonna. That image, it's said, for years, and the Lampedusani will tell you it was made by someone at the time of the Crusades. No, not really. It's probably about 18th century. If you walk down the main street of Lampedusa called Via Roma, you'll pass the house of Pasquale. There he is on the left. And he's standing near his image of La Madonna del Porto Salvo, the Madonna of Safe Haven. And he has an image hanging right on his door. In a basket below this image are prayer cards with prayers to her. He'll happily give you a prayer card and happily tell you the whole story of Our Lady of Safe Haven. On the right, you can see Pope Francis. This is in 2013, the year we were in Lampedusa, laying flowers in front of the statue of Our Lady of Safe Haven. She was brought out of the church that day for his arrival so that she could be placed right near the altar where he would say Mass for 50 immigrants then on the island and hundreds of Lampedusani and visitors there. They're setting up the altar right behind the Pope as he places the flowers. And here he is at the pulpit giving a sermon. Can you see Our Lady of Safe Haven? She's right to the right of the pulpit. Quite an artistic pulpit made from remnants of one of the boats that had brought the immigrants over by migrants, excuse me, not immigrants, the migrants over. And this was made from a decrepit old boat. Lots of them are piled near the port. I call it the cemetery of the migrants' boats, actually. And a local carpenter named Francesco Tuccio made this pulpit out of the remnants of one of the boats that brought the migrants over. I think you call the steering wheel of a boat in English, don't we call it the helm there? And you can see that wheel there, the helm, which hopefully led the way for many immigrants to the port of Safe Haven. Here is the altar, and you can see it. It is blue, green, white, and red, and it is one of the immigrants' boats repainted and migrants' boats, excuse me, repainted and made into an altar by Francesco Tuccio. Pope Francis to the left, and he's holding his pastoral cross, which was also made by Francesco Tuccio from remnants of a migrant boat. And these are just tidbits of a boat made in for this cross, which the Pope, of course, took home with him to Rome, most delighted to receive it as a gift. This is the cemetery where carcasses of these decrepit boats that brought immigrants over from North Africa, principally from Tripoli, are laying along the road near the port. I think this photo says a lot, actually. It's two carefree tourists walking along the road near the port past some of these boats. Look at the one just behind the girl. You can see the writing in Arabic. And opposite those boats is the port of Lampedusa, as it is today. When the Pope was on the island in 2013, he met with many of the immigrants. A touching moment was when this young man in the middle in the white shirt gave him a prayer book. It was in English. It was Psalms in the New Testament. He found it in the hull of the boat that he was on before he climbed out of it on the island of Safe Haven. Look at their T-shirts. You can see the one on the left. You can see the word Francesco in yellow. They said Benvenuto Francesco, their T-shirts. Welcome, Pope Francis. We were there in August following his visit of July 8th, and there were still the posters up. Benvenuto tra noi, Papa Francesco. Welcome among us, Pope Francis. This is on a store where fish was sold. This is a banner on a balcony. Papa Francesco, sei l'unica speranza concreta. Pope Francis, you are the only concrete hope. This is on the door of a store where you could buy sponges of Lampedusa and shells and so forth. And this poster says, thank you, Pope Francis. Lampedusa loves you. Before he left, Pope Francis flung a wreath of flowers into the sea as tribute to the immigrants who had not made it to the port of Safe Haven, the migrants. I'm always saying immigrants, but you know I mean migrants. And at the time this wreath was flung into the water, it was this was a cemetery for 20,000 migrants who did not make it to the port of Safe Haven. Of course, I wanted to see the cemetery while I was on Lampedusa, because the reason for wanting that I wanted to go there for my 65th birthday, Pino said, what would you like to do? And we were visiting his family in Palermo. I said, I really want to go to Lampedusa. The ferry ride is 7 to 9 hours, but we took a plane there. And I said, I want to meet some of the immigrants. I want to hear their story. So I felt it was necessary for me to see the cemetery. And I went to the cemetery, and there were the tombs of many Lampedusani, but then there was this section of the cemetery where there were the tombs of some of the migrants who had not made it safely. And I talked to actually the man who had just finished digging the graves for 15 migrants. And each cross has a number on it. They had no identity documents. And he made sure that each cross had flowers of some sort, plastic flowers around them. It was quite poignant to see on the left the graves of migrants. One is called number 2. One is called number 5. And next to those graves were the beautiful tombs and family mausoleums of Lampedusani. in granite, in marble, with fresh flowers, with the pictures beautifully polished of the deceased in there. I did meet some immigrants. We did. These are three young men from Eritrea. They made it safely. They told me that no one on their boat died. They were very happy to have arrived at the port of Safe Haven. They were happy to be photographed. And I think I gave the photograph to them. I think one of them had a cell so that he could communicate with his family and was going to send it home. These are some other Eritreans on the right that I met, as well as two young men on the left. One was from Mali. The other was from Gambia. And I asked the young man from Mali, the one in the white T-shirt on the left, was it difficult for your mother to know that you were going to leave home, cross the Sahara, get to Tripoli, try to get to Lampedusa? And he said, no, my mother knew that if I stayed, she told me, you'll probably be dead within the month. Because this was the time of enforced conscription into the army for young men when the country was at war. These are more immigrants, and I believe they were from Gambia. And this is a blurry photo, but I had to put it in because these were three young Nigerians that I met, and we talked for a while, and then they were speaking, of course, excellent English. So was the young man from Mali who'd studied it at university, actually. And I said to these three young Nigerians, would you like to taste the gelato of Lampedusa? And they said, oh, yes, please. So we went in and I wanted to buy them gelato. But the gelataio, the young man scooping up the ice cream, and he's dressed in black there, refused to let me pay. The ice cream was offered by him, and he even asked them if they wanted some whipped cream on top, and of course they did. I found the people of Lampedusa, generally, the ones we met at least, quite genteel, quite receptive of the immigrants, very sorry about their situation. Donatella, whose photo you've seen at the Alimentari, told me if immigrants came in and wanted food, she wouldn't let them pay. She would give them the food that they needed. I also wanted to see the Centro di Accoglienza, which is kind of a euphemism, I think, for the welcome center. Terribly overcrowded are these welcome centers. There's places for 90 people in the welcome center of Lampedusa, and I think now there's nearly 1,000. It's a very difficult situation also because of COVID. So now what Italy is doing is creating refugee centers on ferry boats, which they're anchoring off the coast because there isn't any more room for all the immigrants coming over. As I mentioned, I think 300 left Tunis yesterday to come over. This is the immigrant center, and you can see two migrants, returning to the refugee center, or the center of welcome, Centro di Accoglienza. After a walk through the town, they're free during the day to go out and walk through the town. I climbed up the rocks and tried to get a photo. And I took this photo, and inside were 2 soldiers and outside were 3 soldiers. And one of them came scrambling up the rocks. He gently put out his hand and said, Signora, l'aiuti, scendiamo. Madam, let me help you. Let's go down. And he kindly explained that no one could be around the fence and no one could take photos. So here is the stunning sea of Lampedusa surrounding the island, which the immigrants crossed to get to this port of Safe Haven. They, however, did not have the pleasures that we had on a boat taking us around the island on a day cruise. It's a must if you go to Lampedusa. The trip around the perimeter of the island, because this island, I think, is about 15 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide, takes about 8 hours. And it includes, swimming off the boat in pristine coves. And we asked around, what is the best boat ride? And everybody told us, go on Lady Francesca. This is the boat called Lady Francesca. These are 2 of the coves where the owner of the boat, Sergio stopped, thank you, so that we could take swims. And his future son-in-law, Pietro was there to help him. And I told him that I wanted to, write a story about Lampedusa. And he said, oh, well, then come see our beautiful boat. And he took me to the level below to the kitchen where they were preparing lunch and showed me the beautiful tile work, the cupboards, the carpentry work, etc. He and his future father-in-law did it all. Here he's about to serve us our antipasto, which was olives from the island of Lampedusa, tuna fish marinated, caught by his future father-in-law, Sergio, seasoned with island capers and so forth, sun-dried tomatoes. They fixed us an absolutely divine lunch that included a pasta dish made by Sergio on the right. You can see him here, with fresh tuna that he'd caught. It's a pasta seasoned with tuna, island tomatoes, pine nuts, capers, oregano from the mountains of the island, absolutely delicious dish, followed by scampi lampedusane, which is a sort of shrimp dish of the island, and fresh salad. You can see it there. And by the time we finished our lunch, and here we are up on the deck, these are some of the people on the boat with us. We were all very good friends. After sharing delicious foods, glasses of wine of the island, Pino had just said to me, salute, because cheers, because my birthday would be the day after. So this ride around the island was a celebration, actually, of my birthday. Here's Pino looking out at the sea and the lavic rock of the island. And some of the people, after swims in the coves, spread out their towels at the top of the boat and just took in the sun, enjoyed the view around them, and then dove back into the sea to swim in grottos like this. This is a lavic rock grotto on the right. We passed another small boat there, private boat, people swimming off that. So this is Lampedusa, the island of refuge, the island of the port of safe haven, and it's a must if you're ever in Italy, and I hope that you can come back to Italy soon. Another gem off the Sicilian coast, but north of Palermo, is the small island of Ustica. And this is an island of refuge, but not an island of refuge, if you will, for immigrants. It is not towards Africa. It's actually toward the coast of Italy, north of Palermo, about 50 miles. And I think every time we went to Palermo the last few years, at least 4 or 5 times, we'd spend a few days on the island of Ustica. And Ustica has an ancient history. There were people on this island creating fortified villages as early as 13th century before Christ, if you can imagine. So early ancient peoples discovered the beauty of this island of refuge. Refuge in the sense of self-refuge, a place to flee, a place to get away from daily life routine. There's one little village. At the top of the village on the main street is the church of the 18th century. Along the main street are small cafes and bars where people sit and eat under the shade of the immense ficus trees. I call Ustica, and I once wrote an article on it. It was called The Island of Colors. The wonderful colors of the stucco of the houses, as is typical of Mediterranean areas, flat roofed houses. Pino explained to me for a couple reasons. On the top of the roof, you could dry out your tomatoes, dry out your capers, dry out your oregano, dry out your wash. And he also said, Pino, my husband, as you know, is a builder, that a flat roof is far easier to build than a roof which is slanted. And also, of course, in the Mediterranean world, there's no reason to have slanted roofs to let the snow slide off. And here you see the colors of the modern part of Lampedusa, modern, if you will, with the stucco houses. And on the right, these ancient houses in the upper part of the village of Lampedusa are from the 19th century, 18th, when this was under the reign of the French Bourbon kings. And we talked about them in my previous lecture on Sicily. And this was part of the kingdom of the two Sicilies. And these houses were built by slaves brought in from Tunis. of the black lava rock with a little bit of mortar. Colors, Lampedusa. In the walls on the left, as you can see, even in the fish sold in the main square by this fisherman, I think his name is Francesco. Some people sell vegetables and so forth that they grow on their lands outside the town, right outside their front door. So the colors include the bright reds of the tomatoes, hot red peppers, the greens of their capers. And you can see the island capers in that bottle there, which is a fruit juice bottle. This woman is selling some of her capers. I don't remember what was in the bottle. I imagine some of their wine. In the plastic bag hanging near the tomatoes is the oregano of Ustica. In the foreground, some of the beans that she's grown. The colors are also in the murals, which decorate many of the homes of Lampedusa. There's a mural to the left of this little girl. She's standing in the doorway of her grandma's house. Her grandmother has just gone in. And they were sitting out front selling to passerbyers their beautiful purple eggplants, you can see there. Some of their red peppers, you can see the chain or the string of red peppers, and their fresh tomatoes. The lady on the right is sorting lentils. The island is known for lentils. The fine lavic rock soil is perfect for the cultivation of lentils. So in a lot of the back streets of Ustica, you'll see women sorting out the lentils, throwing away the little stones, which can get in there when they harvest the lentils. This gentleman is proudly showing me the mural on his house of the centuries-old ficus trees of Lampedusa. The grocery store of Ustica, the grocery store and place where they sell bread, the panificio, has a colorful mural over the door. On the right, you can see a collage of different murals of Ustica. The upper three are in colorful maiolica tiles. The lower two are painted. And these murals here are on the wall of the shop where Vespas are sold or Vespas are rented. If you wish to ride around the one road on the island, which circumvents the perimeter. Generally, when we move on the island of Ustica, Pino and I, we don't rent a Vespa. We hop on the little orange buses, which go around the island, and you can hop off wherever you want to climb down the little cliffs to swim in the coves. Here, leaping dolphins, and two islanders here on the right taking it easy after probably a day fishing or something. And I really like this photo on the left because it shows an island mural here, a mural of Ustica. The woman is picking sunflowers. The sea is behind her. And look at how the colors of the hanging wash blend with the murals. On the right, there's a mural done in yellows and oranges, and the shuttered green window there kind of matches the woman walking up the street in the green and white pants. Murals backdrop the cafes of the island. Murals backdrop the restaurants. In the second photo on the right, that is a restaurant where Pino and I often ate. You can see them in the back there in the left-hand corner. These are two local Lampedusani, elderly, no longer out there fishing, just enjoying the quiet and watching the tourists walk up and down the main road. The island of Lampedusa, the colors come out, in Ustica, I say Lampedusa. Ustica, the colors are evident also in the vegetation, the beautiful fuchsia of the bougainvillea on your left, the red of the hibiscus. The gardens are absolutely lovely. The yellow of the prickly pear called Fichidindia. If you remember my last lecture on the culinary mosaic of Sicily, we talked about Fichidindia as coming to Sicily with the Arabs, probably during their conquest of the 9th century AD. The colors include also the orange of the dates, of the date palms. The beautiful muted whites of the caper flowers. The island is covered with caper vines. They crawl up the black lavic rock. The colors for me of Ustica are also these greens blending with the reddish brown soil of the lavic rock. Here we're seeing vineyards. Some plots are vineyards, other plots were probably sown with plants to cultivate lentils. This photo here shows you volunteers cleaning up around the fortified walls of Ustica. And these are probably the oldest fortified walls in Italy. They date to the 13th or 14th century BC. So even in the 14th century BC, people were coming to Ustica as an island of refuge, of repose. Here are tombs which date from about 1500 BC. And in the 18th century, the Bourbon French take over the area and they build guard towers. You can see one there off in the background. That's an 18th century fortified tower of the Bourbon French. Here's another one of the lookout towers, see down here behind to the left, built by the Bourbons in the 18th century. They also used them as prisons and to hold captives the people who were their enemies. Of course, the Sea of Ustica is something to be seen and explored on boat rides. It is absolutely stunning also because the aquamarine colors, the turquoise, blend so beautifully with the black lavic rock. We took a boat ride around Ustica as well, since this is protected marine territory, zona marina protetta, declared so in 1986, the first protected marine area of Italy. Boats must be small. You can only go in certain areas. Swimming is allowed only in certain areas. Fishing is allowed, but with simple lures. Skin diving can be allowed only in certain areas in this zona marina protetta, which Ustica is as of 1986. So our boat ride around Ustica took place in a small boat with just a couple people. And the person taking us allowed us to dive off and swim in coves like this, right near the lavic rock. And here you can see a boat anchored just off the lavic rock and people swimming in the waters. There's Pino swimming in one of the grottos of lavic rock. You could go inside the grottos and swim in them. One of the joys of Lampedusa for me, Ustica, excuse me, Lampedusa, Ustica. One of the joys of Ustica is Pasquale Palmisano. He's no longer with us. Alas, alas, he died at the age of 100. The year we did not go to Ustica when we were in Palermo, it was 2013. It was the year that we decided to go to Lampedusa. When we weren't going to Lampedusa every year before that, for at least 4 or 5 years, we'd go to Ustica for a few days after visiting Pino's family in Palermo or during our visit in Palermo. And we rented a little apartment outside the village with an elderly couple. And near their apartment was always Pasquale Palmisano sitting on a little wicker stool, weaving baskets. Here he is at the age of 96. Blue twinkling eyes, as blue as the sea of Lampedusa. And as he, of Ustica, why am I saying Lampedusa? And as he wove his baskets, he would tell me stories of his life. And he said, since I'm a little boy, I've been making baskets. He said there were 11 of us in our family, and we needed baskets for everything. We used baskets to pick the lentils, baskets to pick our olives, baskets to pick our grapes, baskets to use to siphon the ricotta, baskets that held the cheeses my papa made. And he said, as I got older, one of my jobs, he went to school till 4th grade, which was typical of the elderly people at the time. One of my jobs was to take melons that we raised to Palermo to be sold by boat. Which boat? Only sailboats in those days. Found out later he sold them at the Ventotene market, which I talked about in my last lecture. And I talked about in my lecture on the Mediterranean diet and art. You may remember the wonderful painting of the Ventotene market by Guttuso. And he told me that he didn't wear shoes till he was 20 years old. I said, what did you wear, Signor Pasquale? And he said, whenever we had an old donkey, my father would kill it, tan the hides, and he made us shoes of the hide of our donkey, except there were a lot of shoes needed because there were 11 of us. So an absolutely astounding life, tremendously to be admired, the joy he felt. He was still weeding lentils at the age of 97, just 3 years before he died, taking care of work in the lentil fields. The day I was there, he had these baskets he made along the roadside selling his melons, some of the tomatoes, and some of the figs. This is one of his nephews who now lives in northern Italy, Pietro, but would come every summer back to see Zio Pasquale, Zu Pasqua. He's called on the island. Everybody on the island called him Zu Pasquale. And this is his grandson called Pasquale. In Sicily, you don't name a son after a father. You name your grandson after his grandfather. This is Pasquale. He just gone across the road to water their donkey. And he was then filling up a basket or a bag for a gentleman staying up the road with tenerumi, which is a kind of squash, or cucuzza, as they say in Sicilian, a long, long squash. And you make pasta with a sauce made from the leaves of the tenerumi plant. We stayed with the Signore Alessandri, Gabriella and her husband Guido, and Gabriella most of the time wore black and little gold earrings. She was still in mourning and always will be for her daughter who died. And she told me, we used to have long talks. She told me my daughter died because she lost the will to live after her own daughter died. So Signora Gabriella will be in mourning for a long time for both a daughter and a granddaughter. And what a life she has had. She was telling me about that life. We're in her living room here, and she's doing some of her embroidery. And she said, Lampedusa, many years ago, Ustica. Why do I want to say Lampedusa? Ustica, many years ago, there wasn't enough work on the island. And many of the men, including her husband, went to Switzerland to work. So her husband, Signor Guido, went to Switzerland to work. And this woman lived for the years her young children were in high school in Palermo with the 4 children. And this is typical of island life. These islands didn't have high schools. Ventotene, the same. I don't know what they did on Lampedusa. But Ventotene, the mothers would go with the children during the high school years to live on Formia on the mainland. And she went to Palermo with her 4 children, and her husband was in Switzerland earning a living. And then they were able to come back to the island of Lampedusa. Ustica, it'll always be Lampedusa for me, Ustica, Lampedusa. And here she is in the evening, and she's sorting the buds off her basil, and I think she's probably going to make pesto. We did see Signor Pasquale, fortunately, on our last visit to Lampedusa, which was in 2012. At this time, he was 99 years old. He wasn't down on the Palmisano land any longer. The Signore Alessandri told me he was living in the town. He told me, I must live in the town now because my wife can't walk anymore. And so we can't live on the land. And he takes care of his wife. He was taking care of his wife. Here he's 99 years old every day till 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, a caregiver would come in, and he would go to the main square of Lampedusa to sit with to sit with some of his cronies who'd be playing cards. And next to him here is Signor Gaetano, and he was talking with me about Zu Pasquale. He said he's a Zio for everybody on this island. And he was talking about this amazing gentleman, his amazing memory, his vitality. And Zu Pasquale said to Gaetano, he said, I don't have a good memory. This is the Signora Americana who came to visit me, but I don't remember her. Well, the man playing cards to the right laughed and um, said to him with a grin, he said, Zu Pasquale, don't worry. I don't even remember the name of a woman I met yesterday. And there is Zio Pasquale, one of our finest memories of the island of Ustica, who's now no longer with us. I see something on the screen here, Julia, which I'm not sure about. Catherine Campagna requests the remote control of my screen, so I think I have to decline. Okay. Sorry, Catherine, we can't do that. We have this message up here. I'm glad I have my techno here. Huh. Okay. Okay. So this is our last visit to Ustica, was the year again, 2012. And here is Zu Pasquale, memorable figure. And now we're going on to our final island, Ventotene, which is not Sicily now. We're talking about Latium. This is just south of Rome. I'm sure some of you, when you think of Italian islands, what do you think of? Capri, Ischia, Capri, Ischia. Yes, yes, lovely. But do discover Ustica, do discover Lampedusa. And for goodness sake, do discover Ventotene. Ventotene is a hop, skip, and a jump from Rome. You simply take a train 1 hour to Formia, and then ferries go out to this island of Ventotene, called actually by the Romans Pandaria. And this is an island of refuge, not in the sense for immigrants, but refuge again for those wishing to spend a day or two on an island of peace and quiet, simply enjoying the sea and the great seafood and lack of external stimuli, really. What I'd like to do here for the island of Ventotene is simply give you a checklist of what you should do when you go to Ventotene. Not if you go, you must go. This is the arrival at Ventotene. Up on the left, you can see the Castello, it's called, 18th century building, which is now a very interesting archaeological museum with Roman tidbits found on the island and so forth. And to the left, you can see a lighthouse. In front of the lighthouse, where those black rocks are, was the area of a Roman fish hatchery, and the Roman port was there of Ventotene. So when you go to Ventotene, a must is to go to the forno, or the bakery, of the Aiello family. Signor Gaetano Aiello is no longer with us, but his son Pasquale is there making stunning pizzas, stunning breads, and his daughter Francesca is there, happy to serve you the cake of almonds and yellow cream. Or there's Francesca with a person who works with them, the famous focaccia di scarola. This is a focaccia typical of Ventotene, created by the Aiellos, of focaccia bread stuffed with escarole, which they've sauteed. And after you've had your eats at the bakery of Aiello, you want to walk it off. So you want to walk up the ramparts past the pastel houses. There's 3 ramparts which lead you up to the center village. And this, if you go this way, you're seeing right in front of you what was the old Roman port of dating back to 100 AD. And here you can see the ramparts leading up. The ramparts leading up were created during the Bourbon reign here in the 18th century by one of their architects. To work off the goodness of the Forno Aiello, you may wish to enjoy swimming. This is our favorite place to swim. We've been to Ventotene many times. I first started going with a friend from Rome years ago, then enticed Pino to go. He's hooked too now on the wonders of Ventotene. We swim right here off these lavic rocks. This is the tip of a volcano Ventotene, volcano of probably about 600,000 BC. It's not known, of course, exactly. Some people enjoy the sea, swimming off boats right below the lavic rock. Another must do to put on your Ventotene checklist is start the morning with coffee at the Bar Ristorante Verde, which is right in the one main Piazza Ventotene. We rent a little room about a 15-minute walk from here, up in the center part of the valley. Of the island. It's a small island. Ventotene is about 1 kilometer long and about half a kilometer wide. We start by having coffee here on the late side, 9:30 or 10. We read books and wait because we're waiting for the newspaper to come in. It'll be brought in by boat at between 10:30 and 11. So then we go and get the newspaper, read the newspaper for a while. And before we go down and take a swim, if we're reading for quite a while, it'll be time for lunch, also at the Ristorante Verde. And seafood, of course. Whoops, I have this thing, Catherine Campagno, excuse me. The seafood is stars here, of course, on this island. Pino is religiously going to order his mussels steamed with lemon juice, or as you can see on the left, it might be shrimp and could be also, what is our word for, hold on a second, I'm losing it. Squid, of course, the fried squid. Other delicacies too, such as swordfish. Just to the right of the Trattoria Verde, to put on your checklist, is a stop at the bookstore of the island. The bookstore is called the Ultima Spiaggia. After all, Ventotene can be called the literary island. People go there for quiet. At least years ago, very few on their cell phones, but what you saw everywhere would be people reading at the cafes, people reading at the restaurants, people on the rocks reading, people down at the one little beach reading. And sometimes in the evening, the owner of the bookstore, Fabio, would conduct conferences where people would speak, perhaps authors of books. Inside the bookstore, you can see mothers with their children selecting books for the day's reading. There's Fabio welcoming you into his bookstore called Libreria Ultima Spiaggia, the last beach. And Fabio owns a bookstore in Comagli, near Genoa, south of Genoa, but every summer he's on the island of Ventotene in his bookstore here. Across from the bookstore is the Castello, which was again a Bourbon structure built in the 18th century, and now it's an archaeological museum containing many objects found in the Roman ruins of Ventotene, including in the area of the Roman cisterns. This is another must-do thing to add to your Ventotene checklist, which is to take a guided walk in the evenings with a guide. We had a wonderful guide called Silvana through the Roman cisterns of 200 BC to 200 AD. Another evening guided walk, which is extraordinary, is that by young Elena. You can see her here, who speaks with enormous passione as she gives a guided tour of the Villa Giulia, it's called. It's unlikely that Giulia was actually in this Roman villa because she was sent to the island of Ventotene as punishment by her father. In the 2nd century BC, her father, Caesar Augusta, confines his daughter to the island of Ventotene for what he said was theoretically adultery. And she is on this island in confinement for many years. Then she's released from the island. After many years on the island, she is allowed to return to Rome. So this island becomes an island of confinement for many a Roman woman sent there. Tiberius, also confined to the island, Agrippina, who was confined there in the 1st century AD. Agrippina's daughter Julia Livia was also confined there, and she was confined there by her brother Caligula. And she went through 2 periods of confinement. The other period of confinement was under the Emperor Claudio. Also sent here as a point of confinement was the wife of Nero. He wanted to eliminate her in order to marry Poppaea. So this, for the Romans, was often an island of for people that they wanted to eliminate, if not permanently, temporarily. Actually, Nero's wife was beheaded. She wasn't just sent here for a period, she was eliminated on this island. This is the guided walk. We're in this group here, walking out to the island of the Roman villas in the evening with our guide, Elena. This was an island of confinement as well, the island of Santo Stefano, 1 kilometer across the water from Ventotene. Your checklist for Ventotene includes taking a tour of the island of Santo Stefano, literally an island of confinement. An island of confinement for the fascists during World War II, and it is here on this island of confinement that Altiero Spinelli will co-write with a man named Rossi the Ventotene Manifesto, which is a proposal for a united Europe to create unity among the countries after the travesties of World War II. And this was written in 1941 to 1942. Thus, we can call the island of Santo Stefano the birthplace of the European community, quite literally. This is the carcere, or the prison of the island of Santo Stefano. It was designed, I think his name is Jeremy Bentham, an English architect, designs it for the Bourbons in the 18th century, the Bourbon kings then ruling this territory. And he creates it, if you will, in a half circle, so that literally one guard could view every one of the 99 cells. The idea was encouraging everyone to behave because they were being watched. There is a fascinating guided tour of the island of Santo Stefano given by Salvatore. Here we are in the center of this prison, former prison. It was closed in 1965. Listening to his really fascinating presentation, you can see Pino just off to his right. Salvatore has the white shirt on. Pino's there in his gray shirt listening. And Pino and I walked up to the top of the island just outside the carcere. We're standing right near some of the crosses, which mark the graves of many of the confinati, or those confined there who weren't able to leave, who actually died there. Altiero Spinelli, I believe, died in Rome. In 2016, there is the meeting here of European heads of 3 countries. Matteo Renzi, there he is right there representing Italy. He proposed this meeting as a renewal of the Ventotene Manifesto, the idea of a united Europe. And this was done right after the British declared Brexit. And at this conference on Ventotene, he was with Angela Merkel and Hollande, Francois Hollande, then Prime Minister of France. Here they are arriving by helicopter. The meeting took place on a destroyer just off the island. And this is Renzi. You can see Merkel and Hollande at their arrival as the helicopter lands. And this is the morning before, in front of the Castello City Hall nowadays. They were erecting the 27 flags representing all the European countries. And right across from the piazza in Fabio's bookstore, many of the books were related to this summit of Italy, France, and Germany. And the posters were saying, this is the starting point again from the Ventotene Manifesto to create another united Europe, and sold many books also about the Ventotene Manifesto, of course. And here you can see the Castello already with the 27 flags out front. And, excuse me, yep. And in front of the Castello, there was an interviewer of television, national television, interviewing people about what they thought of this meeting. Among the people interviewed was my husband, Pino. You can see him there on the right. After the interview, we went to the cemetery. We wanted to see the grave of Altiero Spinelli, and the cemetery was being prepared for the meeting. Beautiful flowers set everywhere, all the graves pristinely cleaned, getting ready for the arrival. Coming to the cemetery to leave a wreath would be Renzi with Merkel with Hollande. There's Pino before the arrival of the leaders, at paying his respects at the grave of Altiero Spinelli. And you can see here, he survived his confinement, dying in Rome, I believe. Let's see, he died at a ripe old age, 1966 he died. Outside the cemetery here, these gentlemen were very happy to pose for a photograph. Pino took this photograph. This is the, what do you call it? This is the squad of those police who are especially adept at finding out if there are bombs planted. The anti-artificieri, what do you call it? The de-bombing experts. And of course, they had to be there to make sure everything was safe for the leaders of Europe. They were very happy to have their photos taken. Look at those handsome young men. There's the helicopter coming in, bringing the leaders of Europe to the island of Ventotene so they can pay their respects at the grave of Altiero Spinelli. And so the day after they were there, they'd left their flowers, and Pino went and added some flowers himself. Those blue flowers had been left by the three leaders of Europe who paid their respects here. And the last thing, and probably one of the most important to do to add to your Ventotene checklist, is take the boat ride around the island. And we went with, here we are on the boat leaving with a group from Rome and their young children. And we, at the recommendation of people on the island, went with Gianmarco. We'd always go with Gianmarco. You could write that name down, Gianmarco on Ventotene. And he was fabulous. He didn't just drive the boat. He gave us history and information all the way around our perimeter ride around the island. Here we're in front of the ruins of the Roman villa. It's behind him, and he's telling us the whole history of the confinement of various women of Rome up near the area of the Roman villa. Time for swimming. He stops the boat and off everybody goes into the sea. How's the water, Pino? There he is on the left. And those delightful Roman children leaping in, screaming their hearts out. And of course, we took swims in the grottos, the beautiful, pristine water reflected off, just in beautiful harmony with the black lavic rock. So Ventotene is an island of refuge, not maybe refuge for migrants today, but refuge for you, for me, when we need a place of peace and quiet, away from life's daily routines, away from the stress of today's life. So you've met 3 of the islands of refuge of Italy: Lampedusa, Ustica, in part of Sicily, and Ventotene in the region of Latium, just south of Rome. And let us hope that you can come soon to these glorious islands of refuge.